12. Criticisms, Skepticism and Modern Science. The debate between science and ESP. Extrasensory perception, ESP, has always represented a crossroads between deeply held beliefs and the rigorous scientific method. On the one hand, there are countless accounts of individuals who claim to have had telepathic, foresight, or out-of-body travel experiences. On the other hand, the scientific community requires solid and replicable evidence that goes beyond the simple anecdote. The advent of modern science, with its emphasis on experimentation, measurement, and replicability, has challenged many traditional beliefs. The empirical approach requires that any phenomenon, in order to be recognized as real, must occur in a coherent way under controlled conditions. As a result, many of the claims regarding ESP have been subjected to rigorous testing. For example, over the years, a number of experiments have been conducted to test telepathy. These studies often involve two participants, one of whom tries to convey a thought or image to the other without the use of the traditional senses. Despite some promising results, critics often point to methodological problems or lack of replicability. Premonitory visions, another aspect of ESP, pose an even greater challenge to modern science, as they challenge our understanding of time. How can an individual have a clear vision of a future event? Some researchers suggest that such visions may be the result of highly developed hunches rather than actual flash of the future. Besides the methodological problems, there is also some cultural and philosophical resistance to the acceptance of ESP. In an age dominated by scientific materialism, the idea that the mind can operate independently of the brain or perceive information beyond the five senses is often viewed with skepticism. This skepticism, however, has also led to stricter scrutiny of ESP claims and prompted researchers to develop more sophisticated experimental methods. However, despite the challenges, there is also a growing openness in the scientific community towards exploring ESP. Many researchers recognize that our understanding of consciousness is still rudimentary and that there may be aspects of reality that go beyond current scientific theories. Furthermore, the growing integration of disciplines such as quantum physics and neuroscience suggests that we may be on the verge of new discoveries about the nature of reality and our place in it. In conclusion, the relationship between science and ESP is complex and constantly evolving. While skeptics raise valid and necessary questions, ESP lawyers are calling for more open-mindedness. In both cases, the common goal is a greater understanding of the mystery of human consciousness. As we continue our journey through this chapter, we will focus on the main criticisms raised against the ESP, offering an overview of the most common objections and the responses provided by its supporters. It is a debate which, without a doubt, has much to teach both believers and skeptics. Main criticisms of ESP. The confrontation between extrasensory perception, ESP, and the scientific community has led to a number of well-articulated criticisms. These critiques, rooted in the empirical tradition, question both the validity of ESP experiences and the methodology used to study them. One of the main objections concerns another criticism concerns the anecdotal testimonies. While stories of foresight or telepathy may be fascinating, they fail the scientific criteria of proof. A single anecdote, no matter how impressive, cannot be used as definitive proof of a phenomenon. This is because anecdotal evidence is subject to numerous cognitive biases, such as confirmation bias, where people tend to notice and remember information that confirms their pre-existing beliefs. Research methodology is a further area of criticism. Some skeptics argue that ESP experiments often suffer from inadequate procedures, lack of proper controls, or misinterpretations of data. For example, in telepathy tests where one participant tries to transmit an image to another, problems could arise if the participants have had previous contact or if there were inadvertent cues from the experimenters. Finally, there is the critique based on the principle of parsimony, often known as the Occam's navaja. It suggests that, when presented with several explanations for a phenomenon, we should prefer the simplest hypothesis that requires the fewest and proven assumptions. Many skeptics argue that rather than invoking extrasensory powers, simpler, more mundane explanations often exist for the reported experiences. However, despite these criticisms, there is a community of researchers who argue that ESP deserves further investigation, arguing that there are aspects of reality still not understood by mainstream science. In the next section, we will explore in detail the scientific experiments in this field and the complexity of the results, which can sometimes appear ambiguous or contradictory. Scientific experiments and ambiguous results. Scientific research in the field of ESP has had a tumultuous journey, marked by moments of great interest and periods of profound skepticism. The very essence of ESP challenges traditional conceptions of time, space, and causality, making its investigation particularly complex. One of the first systematic approaches to studying ESP was the card guessing method. In these experiments, a participant attempted to guess or feel a card randomly chosen from a deck. While some studies have shown results that exceeded expectations by chance, others have failed to replicate those results. Even when the results looked promising, the variability and inconsistencies between studies generated debate and doubt. Another example is telepathy research, often conducted using separate emitters and receivers in isolated rooms. Although some experiments have shown a significant correspondence between what the sender was trying to communicate and what the receiver perceived, other studies have shown no such correlation. The interpretation of these results was further complicated by possible methodological errors, such as inadvertent cues or previously shared information. Research on precognition, the ability to predict future events, has also yielded ambiguous results. While some experiments suggest that people may have a vague sense of future events before they happen, others indicate that these findings could be due to uncontrolled confounding variables or bias in data interpretation. This ambiguity in findings is not uncommon when exploring complex or poorly understood phenomena. However, in traditional science, when the results of a study cannot be consistently replicated, questions are raised about the validity of the phenomenon in question. The variability and inconsistency of results in the field of ESP have therefore fueled the argument of skeptics according to which such phenomena are not real or measurable. Yet the continued presence of such phenomena in human experiences suggests that there may be something more to discover, something that traditional research methods elude. This brings us to the important concept of falsifiability. In the next section, we will explore this fundamental principle of science, its applicability to ESP research, and how it can help clarify the ongoing debate between believers and skeptics. The principle of falsifiability. Within the scientific landscape, every proposed theory or hypothesis faces rigorous testing. Can it be proven false? This concept, introduced by the philosopher Karl Popper in the 20th century, argues that to be considered scientifically valid, a hypothesis must be open to being tested and, potentially, rejected. If a theory cannot be falsified, then it cannot be considered scientific. Take, for example, the statement that invisible unicorns exist. While we can't prove they don't exist, we also can't test their existence scientifically, as they are, by definition, invisible and do not interact with our world in any measurable way. Therefore, the invisible unicorn hypothesis is not falsifiable and cannot be considered a scientific theory. In the context of ESP, this principle has led to many challenges. Many phenomena associated with ESP, such as telepathy or precognition, are difficult to measure and replicate in the laboratory. This has led many critics to argue that such phenomena are not falsifiable and, therefore, cannot be considered scientific. However, it is important to note that lack of falsifiability does not necessarily mean that a phenomenon does not exist, but rather that it cannot be studied using traditional scientific methods. There have, however, been significant efforts to make ESP research more rigorous and susceptible to forgery. Experimenters sought to create experimental protocols in which variables could be controlled and measured, and in which results could be replicated. For example, remote viewing experiments, in which participants are asked to describe a place or object from a distance without any prior information, were conducted with strict controls to eliminate any possible conventional explanation of the results. However, even in these cases, the results have been mixed. Some studies have shown promising results suggesting the existence of ESP capabilities, while others have failed to replicate those findings. This inconsistency has fueled further criticism and led to debates about the validity and falsifiability of ESP research. Importantly, falsifiability is not the only criterion for determining scientific validity. Many scientific theories, when first proposed, were considered radical or controversial and faced similar challenges in terms of falsifiability. Over time and as research methods have evolved, some of these theories have become widely accepted. In the context of ESP, there is still a long way to go towards understanding and acceptance. However, research continues, and many researchers are determined to find out if there really are phenomena that challenge our current understandings of reality. The question of the falsifiability of ESP leads us to the next crucial topic, the difference between anecdotal evidence and empirical evidence, and how these influence the perception and acceptance of ESP phenomena in the scientific community. Anecdotal testimonials versus empirical evidence. The debate around ESP has always oscillated between two main types of evidence, anecdotal evidence and empirical evidence. This distinction is fundamental not only to ESP, but to science in general. Anecdotal testimonials are stories or personal accounts of lived experiences. One might think of a friend who says he heard that a relative was about to call just before the phone actually rang. Or, the stories of people who claim to have had precognitive visions and dreams, which then came true. While such accounts are fascinating and may seem convincing, they present a number of scientific problems. First, they are subjective and based on personal experience, which can be easily influenced by various factors, including selective memory, confirmation bias, and suggestion. Second, they cannot be tested or replicated in a controlled environment. On the other hand, the empirical evidence is based on observations and data collected under controlled and replicable conditions. For example, an experimenter might test an individual's ability to predict the outcome of a coin toss under strictly controlled conditions, recording and analyzing the results to determine whether they exceed expectations. Such experiments are designed to eliminate as much confounding variables as possible and ensure that the results are as objective as possible. Comparing these two types of evidence leads to a dilemma. While anecdotal evidence is plentiful and often poignant, its inherently subjective nature makes it vulnerable to criticism and depreciation. Empirical evidence, while it may provide a more solid basis for the existence of ESP phenomena, is often difficult to obtain due to the challenges of designing experiments that can adequately test such phenomena. A classic example of this conflict can be seen in the story of James Randi, an illusionist and skeptic, who offered $1 million prize to anyone who could demonstrate paranormal abilities under controlled conditions. Many have attempted to claim the prize, but none have ever managed to pass the rigorous experimental tests proposed. However, while anecdotal evidence cannot be used as definitive evidence, it can serve as a starting point for further research. Many scientific discoveries began with an observation or anecdote that prompted further investigation. In conclusion, while personal stories and testimonies are essential for putting a human face on ESP phenomena and for stimulating curiosity and research, it is through rigorous scientific experiments and data analysis that definitive conclusions can be drawn. This brings us to the importance of replicability in experiments, a mainstay of scientific research. If an experiment produces consistent results across multiple replicates and in multiple laboratories, the chances that those results are valid and not random are greatly increased. Replicability ensures the integrity and validity of scientific discoveries, a theme that will be explored in the next section. The importance of replicability in experiments. In any branch of science, replicability is one of the fundamental pillars that ensures the integrity and validity of discoveries. It refers to the ability to repeat an experiment or study and obtain similar or identical results. But why is replicability so crucial, especially when we are talking about such controversial phenomena as ESP? First, the very nature of science imposes methodological rigor. The experiments are designed not only to discover new phenomena but also to rule out alternative explanations. When a result can be replicated, this reduces the likelihood that it is due to random variables or errors in experimental design. Consider, for example, an experiment in which an individual claims he can read minds. If, in a controlled environment, this person can correctly guess a randomly selected set of cards, we might be tempted to conclude that he does indeed possess telepathic abilities. However, if other researchers using the same protocol fail to replicate the results, questions arise about the validity of the initial finding. There may have been variables that were not considered, errors in conducting the experiment, or, in some cases, fraud. Replicability also ensures that discoveries are robust. If a phenomenon, such as ESP, is indeed real and not a product of error, it should manifest itself consistently across several replicates and in several laboratories. The lack of replicability raises questions about how genuine an experimental effect is. But replicability is also of practical importance. In medical research, for example, a new treatment or drug undergoes extensive testing and experimentation before being approved for public use. If the positive results obtained in an early study cannot be replicated in subsequent studies, this could indicate that the treatment is not as effective as initially thought, or that there may be unexpected side effects. Also in the field of ESP, replicability plays a crucial role. Let us take the telepathy experiments as an example. If a particular experimental protocol produces positive results in one lab but not in others, researchers need to investigate further. Is telepathy influenced by particular variables? Could the presence of certain people or environments facilitate or inhibit the phenomenon? Or, as many skeptics argue, might there not be a phenomenon to observe at all? Finally, replicability is essential for building a body of knowledge. Each successfully replicated experiment adds another piece to the puzzle, bringing us ever closer to understanding the underlying mechanisms. However, it's worth noting that research on ESP is particularly challenging. The phenomena studied are often subtle and could be influenced by innumerable variables, some of which may not yet be known. This challenge requires a multidisciplinary approach, combining insights and methodologies from different areas of science to gain a comprehensive view. This concept of integration and collaboration will be the focus of the next section, exploring how different disciplines can come together in the investigation of the mysteries of ESP. Multidisciplinary approaches to ESP. The investigation of parapsychological phenomena, such as ESP, cannot be relegated to a single branch of science. Instead, it requires a holistic view, combining several disciplines, to ensure in-depth understanding. The importance of a multidisciplinary approach lies in the fact that ESP phenomena, if they exist, are complex manifestations that can have roots in various aspects of human existence, from biological to psychological, from cultural to philosophical. If you are as passionate about the border between science and ESP as we are, click like and subscribe to the channel. We grow together exploring the mysteries of the mind. Don't miss the next episodes.